Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. The story I'm talking about today is one of my own. Yes, we have hit a milestone of sorts. 40 stories, 40 short stories of 1,000 words concludes today. Not the series, I'm just saying I hit 40. If you're unaware, I'm planning on going all the way to 52, publishing in that year after year after year until I go completely crazy and decide to give up on the project. But technically, it will only be 48 stories to complete an entire year because I did take a month off while I was doing NaNoWriMo, which I will probably continue to do. I'm not sure if I can keep that pace as well as crank out these videos and these stories. We shall see. Maybe I'll be more motivated or have more vitality this year. I don't know. Today's story is a bit of an interesting one. I can't say I have experienced a piece of artwork like this before because it happens to be an album cover. And before you think that's a stupid idea, I did discover this on ArtStation. And I'm gonna have to give away the artist here because the music I listen to is by a gentleman named Artem Chaboka. I'm sure the pronunciation is incorrect. I'll get into more about him when I talk about the artwork. But I thought it was really cool how an artist is actually a musician and he did his own cover art, digitally painted. And so I figured it'd be a perfect opportunity to couple the music with the art, right? So that's the one I went with. This was a very pleasant surprise for me, and I'm really excited that I found it. And I have to say, it's not really the kind of music that I would have chosen for writing. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like in this case in particular, the music significantly drove the narrative in terms of the pacing, which you will see very shortly. And the album's only 3 tracks, but it did not feel repetitive to me at all. As you know, a lot of soundtracks are comprised of shorter songs. This one was 3 slightly longer songs, but I really had a good time with it, so I encourage you to check out the music, check out the art, which we're going to check out right now. This week's artwork is titled Alpha and is by a digital artist named Artem Chaboka from St. Petersburg, Russia. This image immediately struck me as I was scrolling down the feed, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it was music too. So I've already talked about this intro, so I won't go into depth with it. But let's take a look a little bit deeper here what we have. So we have a profile of a man. We have at the very bottom, looks like 2 people holding hands on a rooftop. And there's a mysterious woman with a COVID mask, maybe? I'm not quite sure. Wearing hood. Then above her, amid this just chaotic, beautiful sky is a whale. And then above that is an exploding house with a man. I believe that's the man holding his hand up. So something's going on. And then there's these weird heart-shaped stitched things. And what I love most about it is this man in profile who's housing all of this imagery. He looks like he's reminiscing. It looks like he's recalling these things, and these things were either special or traumatic to him. So I think that's where I'm going to go with it. And amazingly, the artist has given me so many elements to draw from, and it's almost multiple stories, within one. But I only have 1,000 words, so this could either be difficult or one of the easiest stories I have done yet. So Artem, thank you for the amazing artwork. Thanks for the awesome music. You are quite a talent, my friend. So let's see what I came up with. Her love was a horizon lodged in my throat, flat with a pulse of steepled rooftops, but that pulse was rare. Always dead center, no matter how high or low you went, and I usually went high. Slick aluminum shingles, always precarious, but so was she. Broke me out of equilibrium more than her eyes gazing at me above a mask through which her hot breath puffed clouds more beautiful than the ones above. It smelled like the sun. Felt like it too. When she leaned on my shoulder, face to my neck, angled up to aim at the spot behind my jaw and below my ear. Got me every time. Skin electric. The best kinds of sunsets are the ones that look like the end of the world, she'd said. That one had a swirl of fire with a hot center, like looking at a cross-section of earth, that molten core bearing down on me. I shied away from it, she noticed. Afraid of heights? She asked. I shook my electrified neck. The brush of her soft chin that had escaped her mask made it worse, made it better. You afraid of germs? I shot back, stupidly. Her hand left mine, and the leaving made me remember that it had been there to begin with. That's when I knew she was for me. That feeling of absence, a hole. I know that sounds fucking cheesy, but it's true. Prove it, she said and sprinted away across the roof. My sneakers slipped on condensation before I even considered going after her. Maybe I was afraid. Her silhouette soon matched the rest in the dwindling light, head bobbing like a moon or sun, bringing chaos to the skyline. In that moment, I felt like I could touch the moon or the sun. I went after her, skirting vertigo and chimneys and air ducts, telling myself that if I kept up my pace, not hesitating, I wouldn't slip and end my life. Somehow I knew she was worth it. The hand she'd held was so cold it hurt, and I feared if I didn't hold it again, it might shatter like ice. I know that sounds fucking cheesy, but it's true. Hey, Slowpoke! A call that came from everywhere, as if she had ascended to the sky and became the earth and everything in between. But no, that was just my disorientation. I honed in on her location, standing with hands on hips in that sexy way, wet asphalt glinting like gold dust around her. I found my way to a fire escape, and she laughed me the whole way down, clapping me to the finish line I did and didn't want to reach. She tugged her mask down and blew me a kiss before dashing down the street to anywhere I'd follow. Where I followed her was through a maze of piss-scented alleyways, home to a nation of cats who ruled homeless men in cardboard castles. They were scattered ball bearings that tripped me up. I was wrong, she said, gripping a light post with one hand, circling it. You're worse on the ground than on the roof. No kiss this time, virtual or not, before she made her way to the ribbon of water that looked even more majestic, slim and precise, bringing the sky to the ground in an illusion that made my eyes hurt. I picked my way to the docks. She wasn't among the crates crowned with rope and bird shit. I held my sleeve up to my nose to mask the smell. Nothing pretty about that. Then something flew toward me, a bullet or torpedo, a meteor. That frozen hand of mine was my dominant, so I brought it up to deflect the missile, but it was as heavy as a block of ice. My head took the impact instead, right on top. The cutest laugh you could call a cackle flocked around me. Birds took flight as I stumbled back. I mentally thanked the deckhands for leaving so much rope and so many crates. She joined me then to rub it in, or so I thought. She glided to me and kissed the top of my head with her mask still on. I always hated football, she said, picking up the object of her declaration. She tossed it from hand to hand. My brothers made me practice. She nudged herself a seat next to me. I always thought it was such an ugly shape, so I disassembled that one we had and reassembled it into a heart shape. I'm damn good at sewing. I should have laughed, but I didn't, and I could see she waited for me to. I like it, I said, and I did. She punched me in the shoulder. No, you don't. I looked into her eyes that were like staring into the sun. A crash sounded in front of us. Well, she said, miming a telescope. She found it funny. So did I. She held my hand, and it came back to life. We watched that lone giant breached once more until its waves were like all the others. She took my head in her hands, and I almost melted, unsure if I would be able to stand. No, that was the wrong word. She tilted it down to where I faced the ground, our feet touching, connected, and right where my cowlick exposed a hint of scalp, she placed her unmasked lips. Remain whole. It was a phrase I'd needed, not a word. And it blew my roof off. I know that sounds fucking cheesy, but it's true. Tomorrow? She asked. She didn't give me time to answer because she knew the answer. Another shadow lost among shadows. I stayed there, my hand heavy again, but my head weightless, of fire, never smoldering. I never saw her again, but I still come back to that spot, where I am now, because I can never miss a tomorrow. Finally, a story that didn't take me too long. I think it took me just an hour or about maybe a little over an hour. We will see on the clock. But as you can see from this first line, I decided to go for the literal, and I think I think it works. I think it's, when you get emotional, something's caught in your throat, and now that you've heard the story or read the story on my site, you do know that there was it's a romantic tale. I know, right? A first for me. But it is also kind of hard boiled, you might say, in the way I wrote it. So I confess I'm reading the novel by Jeff Vandermeer titled Hummingbird Salamander. And I have a feeling that my writing in this one was highly influenced by it. I think that's okay. I think we pick up on stylistic things while we're reading. But anyway, let's talk more about the story. So my idea was is to work my way up this guy's head chronologically. So in the story, so you can tell that they start on the rooftop holding hands. We see the girl with the mask. We get to the whale at some point. Actually, I should say I didn't go completely chronological because I did the weird heart-shaped football before the whale, but that's all right. So let's talk a little bit more. So yeah, we have a flying whale. We have this beautiful sky that's just kind of like a spiral with a bright sun in the middle. Then there's an exploding house, and rather than doing the literal thing, which I did everything very literal on this entire image, with the exception of that house. So there were some things rolling around my head of, well, maybe she died in this house, or maybe there was an accident. But the more I thought about it, I couldn't come up with a convincing reason why she would end up in an exploding house the way I had written it so far. So by the time I got there, I was more or less working my way up this guy's head. And when I got there, I thought, I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to make it symbolic rather than literal, so or metaphorical. So that's what I did, and I think you'll notice too that she tossed the football, and I never addressed how she got a football on the dock. Maybe in the rewrite when I before publication, I'll go back and maybe add like a little hint of maybe him wondering like why is there a football on these docks, or maybe there's a reason why these people who work on the docks were maybe tossing a football in the break. I did not mention that. So the reason why I went there is I feel like I was using the actual physical location of the illustration where the football hit. So it hit him on the top of the head, and that's where it is. And you'll notice the location of the exploding house. So when she finally kisses him on top of the head, he doesn't get a mouth kiss, poor guy, but she finally kisses him on top of the head, and his his roof blows off. That's what I wrote. Yeah, and I didn't plan on it, but I added the I know that sounds fucking cheesy, but it's true line. I think for it to be part of the story or part of the narrative or part of like just the theme of things, I repeated it. So yeah, once the beginning, right in the first few paragraphs, and then one toward the midpoint, and then finally one toward the end to make it. It's almost just like he's self-aware, right? He's self-aware that he's saying these things, and so I think sometimes when you write, and if you feel like a line is too cheesy, literally cheesy, here I go again. Use it, use it to your advantage. Make it point out to the reader that you know what you're doing. I think that's a failing I see a lot of times when people may write something or read something that's a little cringy. As long as you're self-aware with it, it's going to work. I promise you. Now, even if the reader or the consumer may think it's a stupid line or disagree with it, it's going to work in the form of the narrative because you are aware what you did. Now, it's when you're unaware that things become problematic. So where did this idea come from? I started at the bottom. I started with these two people holding hands and just kind of sent them on a little journey. And I decided that this was maybe the first time they met. I think it's kind of implied that it was, and they had some kind of strange romance, and that led them to a rooftop that's overlooking. It looks like a river or a canal or some kind, and then there's these other rooftops in the distance on the horizon, and so that's what I went with. I just decided that maybe she was a firecracker, let's say, and so kind of one of those girls that is appealing but unappealing, I guess. I don't know, because this guy, he feels like to me he's a little bit submissive. Well, maybe that's the wrong word, not submissive, but he's not quite at her level. He's not as confident as she is and what he wants to do, and he's kind of just at mercy to whatever she's going to do, and so I decided to make her the powerful person in this whole thing because clearly, my interpretation anyway is he's remembering these things. She's masked, and I think that's another clue to make her feel more mysterious and powerful even, is that her identity isn't quite known. Like, we don't really fully know what this girl looks like, and coupled with the idea that her mask looks like literal light coming out, or is, sunlight and this powerful thing, I think that probably influenced me, on my portrayal of her. So even though this is not it's not a typical piece of art that I usually write stories for, because it's for an album cover. It's a collage. It's very atypical of a film poster or something like that. So it's not really meant to be a scene like most of the art you see on there. But I really love the departure because it gave me so much to work with. And it works on the multiple levels because the physicality of it, right? Starting in his throat, we have this emotional memory, caught in his throat, and it just happened to work. And then, working your way up his head with all these weird images that they don't really seem to relate to each other, but I was able to create a story out of those things. And thankfully, there was water in the picture. Otherwise, I'm not sure how I would have dealt with a whale. But the last two or last few stories have been a little bit of a letdown for me. I don't want to say I've hated any of them, but every once in a while you see something and you sit down at the keyboard and just things flow. And this was a very flowing story for me. I finished it quickly, not as quick as my quickest story, but this is one of the quicker ones. Everything seemed to be falling in place. And that's, for me, one of the most, it's the funnest things. You feel like you're in a flow state. You feel like you're not even writing the story, that it's just, you're dictating it. You're seeing it in your head and you're just jotting it down. The characters are going to do what they're going to do. I've already established sort of their personality types, even though the most base version of them. And it's kind of ironic because the album is called Alpha, and I did not depict this guy as an alpha male whatsoever. So that's another thing I think that was a happy accident or a pleasant surprise. And it was good to get back to something that was very action oriented, right? It was, even though this whole thing is internal and he's recalling all this stuff, there's a lot of action in the story. There's a lot of movement. There's some dialogue. There's the passage of time, and then quickly it ends on kind of a heartbreaking moment, right? Which I think, as an alpha male, he, once again, he doesn't end the story as an alpha male. He's continually going to the spot that he met this girl day after day after day, hoping she's going to come up because he can't miss it tomorrow. So, needless to say, there wasn't really much of an arc for this character, but I think that's okay. I think not all of us have arcs, right? Not all of us learn, not all of us change. And there's just something about the mystery of who this girl was and where she went, and will she ever come back? And you can see that I'm 45 minutes in and already just, about 100 words shy of hitting 1,000. And I was a little bit reserved on ending the whole thing how I did. I was hoping, or at least I shouldn't say hoping, but I was planning on having a little bit more lead in to that final line, to that final paragraph. But I think it works. It's almost a reflection of the night they had together, where there's a lot of movement, a lot of action, a lot of abrupt stops, and a lot of just random things happening. And so, right at the end, I just have that final line saying, "I never saw her again." And thankfully, editing wasn't too bad in this. I was pretty happy with the line by line work for the most part, and I think it's just one of those things. You get in a flow state. Every once in a while, I'm working on doing shorter sprints now, where I do not stop whatsoever, because I have the luxury here, even though this is timed, it is supposed to be shorter. I don't stop too often because I don't want to sit here for hours, but I've been working on some things where I'll sprint 5 minutes straight without stopping, without even stop typing, at all, and see where I get, because I'm reading this book about flow state and about writing sprints, and how it just takes time to train yourself to get into and out of that moment. And I think in our busy lives, that's really important, right? You don't want to have to sit down and take a half hour or an hour or whatever it may be to kind of get in the headspace for your story. You want to be able to get into that moment, get out of it, go back into it again whenever you can chip away at the time. Because I think a lot of people wait for inspiration to strike, but that's not really sustainable. I have a lot of stories in my head that I need to get out, and I have a finite amount of time. So that is my latest update on writing. Anyway, is that trying to get faster. I've never been a fast writer, so to speak. I've kind of edited as I went to a degree, and I'm trying to resist that. I'm trying to understand that sometimes just letting your subconscious take over is really where you want to be, right? And then you can kind of connect the dots later. Because staring at a blank page or a blank wall or a blank canvas or whatever it is, I don't work that way. I can't work that way. And I tend to get a lot of my ideas just when I'm not writing, especially when I'm on a long walk or something. That's when a lot of stuff comes to me because I can't help but think about it. I'm always thinking about it, which may be weird and obsessive, but what can I say? I love storytelling and what it brings. So here we are, an hour, 1,000. I'm doing a final pass, it looks like. And so I can't quite say it's nope, not under an hour. Not at all, but I think this is about it. Welcome to the interviewer. I am so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my thoughts on the story. Probably repeat myself from the analysis in case you did not watch that. As brief as I can be. What I liked, what I didn't like. So let's talk about the bad. What didn't I like about this one? I don't want to sound egotistical, but I really enjoyed this one. I liked where it went. I liked how it ended. I liked the line by line work. I guess I should say more the voice of the character. But if I had to pick something, it would probably be the way that I depicted something like the whale or the football even. Those are some loose ends that I think I need to tie up for consistency, but once again, that can happen in the rewrite. So what did I like? Well, I liked the flow of the narrative. It's this interesting concept where you have sort of like a night of romance, let's say, where you meet someone and you're running on purely emotion here, right? There's no logical thought happening. It's just hormones going. It's irrational thinking and possibly someone who's not the best person for you, but you are compelled to follow this person regardless and chase after them. And I'm sure we've all been in relationships like that. So hopefully it's relatable or maybe it hits home a little bit. And while I know my writing style on this one was partially influenced by Jeff Vandermeer's Hummingbird Salamander, I still think that that's okay. I know a lot of writers out there think that, you don't want to read fiction while you're writing because you don't want it to influence your work, but that doesn't really matter. I think we are a product of what we consume. Even if you knowingly are absorbing concepts or stylistic things from something you're reading or watching while you're creating your own stuff, that doesn't make it any different than something you watched or read 10 years ago that's popping into your subconscious, and you're filtering it and translating it into your own way through your own work. I don't see a difference there. So if you're one of those people out there that think that you should not be consuming content that's in the same realm or genre or whatever it may be of what you're working on, don't worry about it. Just do it. Keep reading, because I think that reading is an education, even if it's fiction. And those naysayers out there have no idea what they're talking about. So don't listen to them. And I guess I kind of told a romantic story, so to speak. I guess there's another one, a sketch. I can't remember the title of it, but it's kind of these two androids. There was a bit of a romance or a friendship or some kind of deep connection. But that wasn't quite the same as what I did here. In true fashion, in true Jason Furman fashion, I made it sad. But I don't want to say that it was completely just me. Like, just looking at this image, I mean, if you're looking at this artwork, you can see that this guy, he's not too happy. He's remembering something, at least that's my interpretation, something that was bittersweet, something that still haunts him to this day. And so hopefully that final line, that final sentence really captures his mindset as what you see in this artwork. But that is it for me. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you learned something. Hope you learned something of what to do or what not to do. If you'd like to support the channel, if you'd like the video, give me a like. Subscribe if you like story-related content. Check out my books, my live streams. Everything is in the description below. And keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.